Welcome to the JD Bunkis podcast. Thank you to the Toronto Raptors for just dominating last night. Nothing sweeter than when it's like an early week Western Conference game and you've got the result by the end of the third quarter. You had the result, honestly, like 10 minutes in the basketball game. But I got a lot of thoughts on that. I just want to say quickly, we'll be talking about him. I can't remember when the last time Leafs, Red Wings, and Leafs Sabres were all relevant for all three teams at the same time. So you know me, I'm not a parity guy. I'm not in love with the idea that every team has essentially the same amount of points. Outside of, I guess, the Colorado Avalanche, who deserve their flowers in all of this, and how spectacular it is that they are this dominant in a year where there is so much special repression. And yeah, Tampa's been red hot, and there's some sustained excellence there with their team as well. It's not impossible. Every league's going to have teams that are better than one another, but for the most part, it's been a pretty flat year in the NHL in terms of night to night, you watch a team and you go, wow, it's like, whoo, that's a really special, complete team. But I will say that I have looked at it a little too negatively at times because I like what I like, which is a discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots and the feeling like you can build a dynasty or something special. And yeah, hockey has zagged away from that a little bit this season. But the good side of it, and the thing that I'm most excited for, is these regional rivalries matter. It's good to have Leafs Habs mean something. We saw what it meant to have Leafs Sens matter in the postseason last year and how pumped up everybody got. And it's been a little too long since this collection of teams have all been relevant at once. We've grown accustomed to the idea that it's, hey, Boston, Toronto, Florida, Tampa, over the course of the last decade, take your pick as to who you think is going to finish first and who you think is going to finish third or fourth, and let's play it out from there. So the second half of the season, to me, is going to be far more compelling because you are going to have these matchups that have stakes, and it does start tonight with the game against the Red Wings. All right, Raptors. They come out smoking hot. They just put the pedal down immediately on the Golden State Warriors. It was I got to give a little tip to everybody who likes to sports bet. Raptors are pretty continuously disrespected on sports betting lines still. This was a spot where the Warriors had just lost Jimmy Butler. It was the night before. They've got a lineup full of pretty much, like, there's a lot of Quentin Post, that Warriors team right now. There's a lot of bench players that come out and you go, okay. There's a lot of wide open Draymond shots. Raptors put the pedal down. Emmanuel quickly looks incredible in this game. He's pulling up from everywhere. He's got the early confidence, and he ends up piling up a Wilt Chamberlain stat line, which is unbelievable. 40 and 10 on 80% shooting. So today I'm going to have an Emmanuel quickly conversation. I feel like I've had a bunch of them. That he's the trickiest piece of the puzzle for me with the Raptors in terms of where they're going and how much patience they're going to exercise with trying to figure out whether or not this guy fits the long-term plan. They gave him the long-term contract. They gave him the big money. I think I was the only person at the time who said I did not like the contract or that it was going to be a bad contract or had at least the potential to be a really bad contract. And he puts together a performance like that, and you just see some of the shooting in particular and the way that he started to play inside. And you go, God, the Raps just really don't have that. The Raps don't have a ton of that. And that's one of the problems when you're looking at them heading into the trade deadline, which is they don't really have the depth or pieces or contracts that you would want to move off of and say, well, if you just use this, you could upgrade this area without feeling like you're robbing a significant piece of what their team could be or what their team needs, an element of what their team needs. But I couldn't help but think about Steph Curry last night. So with, again, I'll talk more quickly with S in a minute here, but we spend so much time wondering about, hey, what's LeBron's next move? That's been, the last 7-8 years? Where's LeBron going? What's LeBron doing? Where's he going? What's he going to do? What's LeBron thinking? Who's he going to add to his team? Hey, him and Rich Paul, right? Like we just had another controversy where it was Rich Paul on a podcast talking about whether or not they should trade Austin Reeves for what I was thinking it was Jaren Jackson Jr. LeBron is the greatest player of his generation, and there is not a full overlap with Steph Curry because he is, I think, 5-6 years younger than him. But Steph Curry is the more popular of the two players right now. He means a lot more to Gen Z, I believe, than LeBron does. And we've spent all this time on LeBron. As a greater media ecosystem, I'm not saying Steph Curry hasn't gotten his due. When he beat the Celtics in his last championship, we really did start to elevate him in terms of where we were putting him amongst the all-time greats. I think he still remains, I would guess, I saw Armin wants to talk about jersey sales today. If I had to guess today who's the number one jersey sale in the United States, I actually think it is him over LeBron. Maybe not. I would think that in Canada, he's only behind Scotty Barnes, maybe like Shea. I would guess that he's above Shea. He's loved. And there's an element of we take him for granted because he is such a good soldier and he doesn't create drama. And Golden State has been far more successful for a long period of time than LeBron's teams. But you're looking at that group, and it's hard not to wonder how this is going to end because he is still unbelievable. And he's surrounded, like I mentioned, by the Quentin Posts of the world. He's got a coach that's already taken a knee on the season and saying, we just don't have what it takes to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. Jimmy Butler goes down with a knee injury, and yeah, it really hurts their team. Obviously, he's Jimmy Butler, but he's not anymore. He's not the same Jimmy Butler. And so while we spend this time wondering about the future of a 41-year-old LeBron James, I think that the focus is going to shift pretty drastically into what is Steph Curry's future? Does he just buy into Golden State being what they are for the next few years? Like, are we really going to do Jonathan Kuminga trade rumors when their own general manager is saying there has to be a demand for a trade request to work? I know not all these things end perfect, and we as NBA fans, I think in particular, really like to do the whole, well, a guy can't possibly finish an amazing career like this. We want the storybook ending. We want the competition to continue. We do it with Sidney Crosby in the NHL too, right? Like that's been a big conversation the last 2 years is should you move Sidney Crosby to the Colorado Avalanche and let him have one last hurrah? But I don't want this to be the way the Steph Curry story ends, which is 3 more years with a Golden State Warriors team that just does not feel like it has any ceiling behind or beyond. Hey, they're a fun playing team. Yeah, I don't want that. Baraheni is the co-host of the NBA Daily on The Athletic and Raptors Republican Bleacher Report guy. What's up, buddy? How we doing? Great to have you on the show. Thanks for doing this.
Of course. Appreciate you having me. Yeah. Honestly, the Steph conversation is interesting because for the longest time, I think that door was shut,
Same.
Not even remotely open. And now you start to enter the conversation at the very least because, look, he still is an all-star starter in the NBA. That's how good of a player he is. He is, I think, I would argue a top 6, maybe 7 player in the world. And on any given night, he could be the best player in the world. Like, that's how good Steph Curry is right now. And to your point about LeBron, like, you can't say that about LeBron James right now. As much as we've obviously glorified him, he's one of the best players of all time. But he's not that caliber of player anymore. Steph still is. So I think there is a conversation to be had. There's like a human element to this.
There is.
That to me makes it feel like it is impossible for him to get traded from Golden State.
Same.
And the value that any team would try to cough up for him versus what the Warriors would want in return feels like such a massive difference that they would never it wouldn't become anything at any point in time. But it is an interesting conversation to have, that's for sure.
So there's a bunch of factors here. One that you just mentioned, which is trying to envision him in anything but a Golden State uniform is next near impossible. And the idea that Golden State would willingly want to move, like that they would put any pressure on him saying, hey, Steph, would you like a trade? It's just not going to happen. It's just not. He's earned everything that he has, which is, hey, pull the Kobe move, pull the Dirk move. You're one guy with one franchise. And I do think that that means a lot to players now, especially of his era, that it's such a rarity. But to have that where you're just only affiliated with one franchise absolutely matters. The question becomes, okay, so he's 37 years old. He's 37. I don't think people think that because of, like you mentioned, the play is still so high. But a younger guy, like, so I got a good buddy who's a Knicks fan. And yesterday we were texting about the Knicks and what the future of that team is. And he's like, oh, we have Jalen Brunson. We're fine. We're going to be fine with Jalen. And I go, he is turning 30 as an undersized guard. Like, there's actually more of a NFL running back conversation generally with smaller, undersized point guards in terms of how they're going to age and the impact that they can have on a basketball court. And yes, Steph Curry's shooting is a one-of-one unicorn miracle, but all the other things that he does, like, he's not just a spot-up shooter in the corner or a threat to shoot or pull up. His game is still very complete at 37 years old. So if you're him, this is kind of a two-parter. Look, he goes, all right, I am 37. How long am I really going to have this runway? Like, is it worth trying to chase a championship for one season when I already have all the bona fides versus keeping my life and the comfort and the stability that I have in Golden State and the hope that a miracle happens? And I would think that that's a real consideration. The only one to me is I wish the Hornets were 1 year further down the timeline, because him going to Charlotte would be very cool. And there are some things happening in Charlotte that are very exciting. But can I throw you the other one? He did grow up in Toronto. And
he did. I knew you were going to bring it up.
Well, he had his time here. And so one of my things I hate about all the Raptors trade rumors is that none of these guys are real elevators to me. Like, does Anthony Davis make your team better? For sure. But the risk to the reward, absolutely not worth it. John Morant, same thing. Am I 100% sure John Morant is going to be a more consistent contributor than Quickly is right now? I'm not. I was not in on the Trae Young of it all. Like, go on down who else is there? Sabonis. You think that if they bring in Sabonis, even if it was for nothing, that the Raptors would suddenly be a title contender? I do not. But the idea of Steph Curry with Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes is something where I'm like, that actually does smell to me like you're an Eastern Conference title contender.
That would have to be one of those situations where he's like, hey, I would like to go to the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah.
You know, that is the only place that I'm interested in going. Send me back to Toronto. But yeah, I agree with you. To the point of the other guys that are available here at the trade deadline, none of them make any substantial difference in terms of the championship odds for the Toronto Raptors. And to your point about risk, Anthony Davis has his injury concerns. You know, John Morant obviously has his own injury concerns and whether he'll ever be able to get back to the superstar level he was. Sabonis is an incredibly flawed star in terms of how poor of a defender he is, truthfully. It's just really hard to say, hey, we are going to take, and to your conversation about the Quickly element of this all earlier, like, the Raptors are not a very good three-point shooting team. The only player on that team that can consistently knock down a shot, and he hasn't this year, it's been up and down, but for the most part, is a three-point threat, is Emmanuel Quickly. He's the only guy on the team that poses any sort of threat there. And, you know, over the last 11 games, they're like a below 30% three-point shooting team. They shot 62% last night, which bucks that trend. But when you pluck out that element of IQ or, I know people are talking about RJ in trade rumors as well. Like, those guys provide such important things for you offensively that it's hard to rationalize, hey, we're going to go after Anthony Davis, who, again, how available is he going to be? How good will he be able to be for you this season and moving forward? To the Steph front, sure, it would be great.
We're just doing fantasy stuff. I had a dream about it yesterday.
I hear you.
Watching the game, I was like, man, what would it take? Like, if you were like, hey, we'll give you Colin Murray Boyles, we'll give you every draft pick that we have in the coffers. Like, you take Emmanuel quickly. Like, but that's also a problem for the Raptors, is that you'd be going, hey, we're taking on Steph Curry, but we're removing a bunch of the depth. We have no wiggle room over basically the next 5 years. Because the only way the Warriors would do that is, one, if Steph, like you mentioned, said, this is exactly where I want to go and the time I want to do it. But two, if they got an offer that was so nuts for a 37-year-old player that it set them up for the next decade. And if you're the Raptors, it's probably a risk that doesn't make sense for you either, because you'd be looking at it going, hey, as much as we love Steph, Is this really how we want to position ourselves with everything from the cupboards? Like, this isn't the Anthony Davis trade where we're talking about a first-round pick being involved in
it's
the deal.
all the first round.
Yeah,
picks.
it's like this is picks and pick swaps until maybe the day I die. Honestly, like, you're younger than me, so you might see another Raptors first-round pick, but I don't know if I would ever see one again. So, yeah, it's just fantasy BS talk. But I just thought, like, out of all the Steph Curry destinations that would probably get overlooked once we start to do this, because I'm telling you, I think this is going to become more of a conversation. If this happens next year where the Warriors are the same team and Steph continues to play this way, I just don't – I can't imagine that ESPN's not going to be – when the LeBron James vacuum leaves us, right? Where it's just every piece of oxygen has to go about what LeBron's next decision is, even though, again, he's 41, and I'm not really sure how much winning he's impacting at this point of his career, then we're going to move into a Steph Curry position, especially if Kevin Durant is happy in Houston and all that continues. It's just it's old hat. Okay, so let's get into some of the actual Raptors stuff, because you mentioned you don't think any of those guys are fits, and I agree with you. But that's why right now makes it feel like such a tricky position that they're in, where the Eastern Conference is flat. There's no special teams. The Raptors do put together these performances without certain players in the lineup just about every given night. I think Scotty Barnes has taken a monumental leap. Like, there are so many games now that I watch and I say, oh, he's the best player on the floor, which is a stark departure from what it has been in the past. The Brandon Ingram trade has worked. He's been healthy up until this point, but he's also bought into what they're doing, and it doesn't feel like it's two different teams when he has the basketball. Like, hey, it's Brandon Ingram time, and now it's Scotty Barnes time, and then they're playing two fundamentally different ways. There has been some symmetry between the way that the two guys operate, and it has worked out. And yet you have a roster full of other pieces where there isn't quite enough depth, there isn't enough shooting, there isn't enough rebounding, there isn't enough health, which I want to get into with you, because I think it's an underrated story how they've now played 15 games without two or more starters. But what is your opinion on the timeline in which this team should be operating in when it comes to trying to move these contracts and trying to upgrade this team?
I think it really depends on the contracts, because you look at what Jakob Poeltl signed, and obviously there's probably a level of sticker shock to that just because he hasn't been healthy this season. And so maybe there's a level of buyer's remorse to inking Jakob to that level of a contract. And of course, Emmanuel Quickley, who still has 4 years left on his deal with $32.5 million. Like, these aren't guys that are expiring contracts or expiring salary that a team that is looking to trade an Anthony Davis or trade anybody really would want to acquire. You look at some of the players that are on the market right now. Of course, Trae Young didn't get traded for the value that he wanted, or John Morant won't get traded for the value that the Grizzlies want, but they also don't want to take on long-term salary. And so the Raptors are stuck in a position where, yes, they have the salary to match in any sort of star trade, but they don't have the type of salary that teams want to acquire when it comes to star-level trades. So they're sort of forced into a position where they have to be patient. And without having to cough up multiple first-round picks just to get off of those contracts, it doesn't make sense for them to go out and make any kind of move like that. I think, to your point about the injuries, where this Raptors team is at now, and they've said this over and over again to start this year. Darko Rajakovic has mentioned it a bunch of times, that they are still in a rebuild, still trying to figure out who they are as a team. And I think, to your point about the depth, that's why they're in a rebuild. So much of their ancillary players, the rotation guys in the Grady Dicks, in the Jamal Sheds, in Colin Murray Boyles, they're still so young. They haven't even tasted playoff basketball yet, that they don't know what they have with this team outside of a Scotty Barnes, outside of a Brandon Ingram. And you look at the pieces and you say, there's clearly a identity here that works. Now, how do we plug and play different players into this identity, whether it is eventually upgrading from Jakob Poeltl or Emmanuel Quickley or RJ Barrett? There's a version of this team, at least stylistically, that makes sense, that wins basketball games. And now how do we kind of add on to that continuously over the course of the next couple seasons? Because I don't think they have the opportunity to do that now.
I agree. The only problem is that you've figured out one of the most important elements of your team already, which is that Barnes and Ingram work.
Yeah.
And okay, Barnes is still
And
very
by the
young.
way, Ingram will be extension eligible
Yeah.
before you know it,
Yeah,
right?
I know.
So
And based on the Raptors' track record with Pirtle, they just are going to hand out contract
they will
extensions
hand out that.
as
Yes,
soon as
yeah.
available. The only guy is poor RJ Barrett, who they're like, yeah, you're the only one we're not going to extend for whatever reason. And now they're in a tricky spot with him. So I look at it and say, all right, there is no urgency from me from the fan base level because it's been such a slog the last couple of seasons. I think you and most people who watch this team are just happy to be watching competitive basketball, are thrilled with the development of Scotty Barnes, are thrilled with the development of Colin Murray-Boyles, who is a first-round pick that they seem to have nailed. Like, I was thinking about this last night. Imagine they drafted Kaman Malawak. And maybe
Oh,
he's
man.
better here, but this guy, you know, this is G League, everybody. It's been a zero for that draft pick. And that was what it was coming down to. And you can almost, you can't say over career yet because it is rookie season, but how much money would you be willing to bet at this point that CMB has a better career than Malawak? I would say I'd be putting down a pretty hefty wager fairly comfortably. So they've got an exciting rookie. They do have some depth pieces that are at least intriguing, right, in terms of seeing their development when they get more time and more minutes. And, yeah, when they are healthy, there is a path to being a competitive team, but I do not think a championship ceiling team. The tricky ones to me are, one, you already mentioned it, you cannot move off of Pirtle or Quickly and lose those pieces of your team, but also be sacrificing draft capital or young players in order to do so, because what's the move? You just want more money for free agency? Like you want to have a minor upgrade?
Which
in
is
trade?
not the way this team builds, by the way. Free
Correct.
agency is just out the window. Don't even consider it as an option.
Correct. And yet, I think where Ingram and Barnes are, it's also difficult to envision a path where they're just a draft and development team underneath these guys saying, don't worry, we're going to play the long game out here. We're going to see how CMB develops. We're going to see how Grady Dick develops. And then we've got draft picks that are coming over the next 3 seasons. You're going, I don't really think you have that luxury either. And so it brings you to the RJ Barrett question, which is, what is his value when he's on the floor for you? He's incredible. It doesn't seem like the league is overly enthusiastic about trading for him and tendering him a contract extension. But do you just give him the deal to kick the question down the road? Like, where are you with the RJ piece? Because I think the other two are already basically, we've gone over it. It's too complicated. You can't remove Jakob Poeltl because they don't have center depth, and you'd have to give up assets. And same thing goes for Quickly.
Yeah. With RJ, it's interesting because after this year, he's an expiring salary, right? And so to that point I was making earlier, like expiring salary has a value to other teams because they like the cap space. They want to be able to attract free agents or use it in any sort of way. So that adds an element. And if you look at RJ right now, the money that he's making, it's like $29 million. If the Raptors were to extend him, I'm not sure what the extension number would be, given one, how important he's been to this team offensively, and two, how effective they are with him versus how effective they are without him, especially on the offensive end. So if I were RJ Barrett, I would, in the contract negotiations, I would pull up with a stat sheet of, hey, this is how you guys perform offensively without me. This is how you perform with me. And I don't know if that's necessarily kind of signing on a dotted line of $30 million again. And is that valuable for the league? Is that valuable for the Raptors to do? Or something lower than that and less than that? And from that point, would RJ Barrett be willing to do that? So I see two sides who probably envision something different for themselves. And to the whole aspect of trading, having expiring money is valuable in this NBA because teams are constantly looking for cap relief. And you look around the league, there will be teams that are trying to do that. It also kind of, to your point, helps you kick the can down the road to say, hey, okay, next season at the trade deadline, we can explore a star type offer. This summer, we can explore a star type offer if there is, you talked about Steph Curry, but if there's anybody else that gets out there as a potential star, you can make a move now because now Quickly is, 3 years left on his contract versus 4, or 2.5 years left on his contract versus 4. There's another year down from Jakob Poeltl's contract. It just kicking the can down the road makes these contracts a little bit more valuable, and that's where the Raptors are at.
Well,
right
especially with Quickly, because the $32 million a season stays flat.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and the cap keeps going up, and it allows them some.
That's exactly right. So I just feel like with Quickly, the idea that they would be trading him now is nonsense, essentially, because of the way that the league values him and that contract. The idea that you'd have to pay on top of it, but also remove a guy from your team who can have performances like the one that he had last night, right? Who had that, how many shots did he miss in the Charlotte game before he hit that big shot? 1 million?
Right. It was 10, actually. 10 threes he missed before he knocked down the last
He
one.
couldn't hit water from a boat. And then all of a sudden he comes up with a huge shot for them. But yeah, to your point about how they just don't have three-point shooters and you're in a tight game, you're in crunch time minutes, you really covet his shot making right now. So yeah, I think you're okay this season. As much as there's going to be this feeling of urgency because of those contracts and because of, the two players that I mentioned working out, the sad reality of it is you're probably going to the deadline with one realistic goal, and that is move off of Ochai's money so that you can get under the salary apron.
Yeah, and try to get some center depth.
Sure.
Right? Try to go out there and switch Ochai's salary for someone that could be a backup big man because you clearly need the size. Mm-hmm. The Warriors are a favorable matchup because they don't – you talked about Quentin Post earlier. Like they don't have anybody who can bang down low at all. They don't have a good rebounder, and they ultimately – they're a very favorable matchup for Scotty Barnes to dominate. He had Wilt Chamberlain-type numbers the last time they played against them with the crazy rebounding. I feel like you need a backup big if you want to see how this iteration of the team ends up doing in the playoffs. And you look at the state of the Eastern Conference, the Knicks aren't playing good basketball right now. The Celtics look really good. Maybe they'll get Jason Tatum. The Pistons look good. The Raptors have not faced the Pistons this year yet. And I think there is intrigue there for a defensive-minded group like the Raptors to go out and see, hey, in a playoff setting, how does Emmanuel Quickley do? How does RJ Barrett fit in a playoff setting? How does Scotty Barnes react? How does Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes, how do those two work off of each other in a postseason setting where it's a 7-game series and you got to battle back? I think that's also valuable information to kind of grab and see, hey, what are the things we need to add to this group in the summer? So
100%. You need to stress test what you have. And that is the way to do it. And honestly, the one benefit I give to the NBA midseason tournament, which isn't midseason, it's like NBA beginning of season tournament, is that you're supposed to, and you have, and a lot of teams have, gotten looks at what their playoff rosters are, what their rotations are, more competitive games. It's at least a peek. It's useful information. For the Raptors, here's the part of it, though, that is more difficult. I mentioned it. They've now got 15 games missing 2 or more starters. And coming into this season, when I did the preview with Blake Murphy, so the biggest question mark for this team is going to be health. How can they actually find out who they are when guys can't stay on the floor? And it's a league-wide issue in terms of rest, recovery, and we do all these conversations about, hey, do we get enough games from any of these players? Injuries are up. There's a style of play discussion in terms of how it impacts players moving forward. But for the Raptors specifically, I don't know how you could be confident thinking, all right, you keep this group together and you take a look at them in the playoffs when it feels like somebody's always out of the lineup. And as thrilled as I am that Ingram has been healthy, I don't think that question goes away as his career gets later and later. It's not one where you go, well, he showed proof of concept this year that he can stay healthy, so now you can take these results and extrapolate them and move them forward. And I as much as I am for the kick the can down the road potential with this team or idea that is the right way to go, there's also an added element of risk where, what happens if Jakob Poeltl has to, he doesn't recover at all from the back stuff this year, and he continuously is out of the lineup? How many assets would it take to move off of that contract if he becomes an essentially unplayable guy because he can't stay healthy? What happens if, RJ Barrett for his contract extension, if he can't get back on the floor consistently? Quickly is at issues being on the floor consistently. And then you do have the Brandon Ingram piece. That, to me, is the scary outcome for the Raptors, is that as much as this has been a fun year, we probably haven't talked enough about how many guys they do not have available on basically every given night.
It's funny. I was doing this exercise with my buddies a couple of nights ago, Like just looking at what are the healthy players in the NBA.
Yeah.
You honestly can count on maybe two hands the guys who are consistently healthy,
Yeah.
are available for the most part, and give you star level value. Like the Shays, Jokic is hurt right now, but that's a rarity.
Yeah.
Like he
The
never gets hurt.
Maxis.
Yeah. Those guys just never get hurt for some reason, and that is a skill in the NBA, as it also is a little bit of luck to the whole injury aspect, taking care of your body, whatever. All of the guys who are available right now at the trade deadline, they have some sort of injury concern, whether it's AD, Ja, LaMelo, Sabonis, whatever. I think this Raptors team has that level of concern, but it's every team that has that concern, and it's sort of something you got to deal with. To the Jakob Poeltl point, if he does end up being this albatross contract, he also has non-guaranteed money on his deal. So after next season, if he doesn't hit this minute point that they need him to, some of his money becomes non-guaranteed, and so that contract ends up actually looking a little bit better if he doesn't hit those restrictions. Although obviously you need him, to play, you need him to be able to actually get out on the floor, because he's so important to what Emmanuel Quickley needs as a screener, as a big guy who can lay guys out. So IQ has an extra bit of space to create his own shot. Same thing with RJ Barrett. We haven't even seen, one of the main guys that Brandon Ingram talked about when he got traded here was, hey, I'm excited to play with Jakob Poeltl. And we haven't seen that come to fruition at all this year. So he's very important to what this Raptors team needs. Screen assists. It's a silly stat for the most part, but like it's true when it comes to a guy on this specific team creating shots for guys without touching the ball. It's very important. So they need him healthy, man. They need him healthy.
Anybody who has played even pickup basketball should understand the importance of having a big guy who is not a black hole offensively, where when he touches the ball, everybody else just stands around and is like, all right, okay, end of possession. He is a unbelievably additive player for a multitude of reasons: the defense, the rebounding, the screen setting, the presence inside. You need him. You genuinely need him. I'm just really concerned now. You're talking about someone who's, 30 years old? He's 30, right? Who's 7 feet tall and dealing with back stuff. It's hard.
Back stuff doesn't go away, man.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me to go, oh, well, don't worry. He'll recover from this. And then moving forward, everything's going to be hunky-dory. It's just, it's more complicated than that for such an important piece for this team. Okay, so that brings us to the biggest question of the day, which is, so we've gone over and we are in agreement that as good as this Raptors year has been, and as much as the biggest piece, which is Scotty Barnes continuing to develop as a two-way star, has been a hit for this team, the Brandon Ingram trade being a hit for this team, that it's a really complicated situation moving forward, and it's going to be a difficult line to walk to turn this from good competitive basketball team into title contender, which is where you want to be. Bobby Webster, there were some reports that he was going to be acting urgently because he doesn't have a contract extension. Michael Grange comes out yesterday and reports Bobby Webster not feeling urgency as he heads towards his first deadline. And I'm paraphrasing here. I wrote this in as top dog. Grange didn't write as top dog. That, in fact, MLSE and he are having exploratory talks on a multi-year contract with those expected to pick up post-deadline. He's a weird guy in the sense of we don't really have a grasp of what exactly he did during the Masai Ujiri tenure in terms of like what the level of credit is supposed to be, or conversely, criticism that he's supposed to get for some of these moves because he's been with the Raptors a long time. Just where are you at with Bobby Webster and the extension and your confidence level that, this is the guy to answer these questions for this organization?
Yeah, look, I think obviously he gets credited with the Kawhi trade because he was one of the guys that helped facilitate it for the most part.
Yeah, and Danny Green was his idea. This is the whole thing.
Yeah.
Bobby Webster made them throw in Danny Green.
Right. To the whole contract stuff and giving these guys these deals and how, I guess, proactive he's been in signing extensions for all these guys. You think of the Gary Trent extension earlier, Chris Boucher, now obviously IQ and Jakob. There's clearly a momentum here from what the Raptors organization. There's a trend to what they have typically done over the last 4 or 5 seasons, which is, hey, we're going to trade for a guy who's an impending free agent. You think of Gary Trent Jr., you think of Brandon Ingram. They do that, bring a guy in, and essentially convince him to stay and sign him to a contract extension. Same thing with Emmanuel Quickley to a certain extent, although he was a restricted free agent. I think that's become their motto. That's probably Bobby Webster to an element. And so when you think of who is available even at this deadline, Anthony Davis is looking for a contract extension, and he has a couple years left. He's also a clutch player who the Raptors have dealt with for the most part. So I think relationship-wise and figuring out how you want to move in this new CBA and cap environment where handing out contracts is not a given is the essential aspect that I'm waiting to see how Bobby Webster tackles. Because for the most part, we can't attribute any sort of, blame or credit to any of these contracts. So now moving forward, how does the contract situations work for this team, right? What is, again, the RJ Barrett situation with his contract? When Grady Dick becomes contract extension eligible, what happens there? These are the questions that I think will, to me, answer how the Raptors are trying to move in comparison to how they've moved over the last 4 or 5 seasons. Yeah.
You can get his work on The Athletic, Raptors Republic, and Bleacher Report. Thanks so much for making time, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. Appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Take care. So, yeah. Positives, but tricky. And a GM who is in that big chair now without Masai Ujiri. And listen, I'm sure that the Raptors and the people that are closest to the team understand just how high level the value is for Bobby Webster, how many of these decisions he has been the anchor on. I don't know how distant Ujiri was from some of the decisions that have worked versus some of the decisions that failed, right? Like Bobby Webster was with him throughout that tenure of not making the pivots at the right time, getting less return on some players that they should have gotten bigger returns on, deciding that the twin timeline idea was not going to work out. And yeah, there is a lot of positive momentum around this team right now, and I do think that they are in a very good spot. It's going to just be fascinating to see this guy now enter the stage where he is the guy and everyone goes, well, you're not in the shadows anymore. This is no longer Masai Ujiri's team. This is Bobby Webster's team. So this will be his first big deadline. My guess, and that's informed by guys like Grange, who know a hell of a lot more than me, is that they're not going to make the big splashy trade, that they will try to add that center depth that S was talking about and dump a contract, that they'll try to go into the postseason and take a good look at their team under those stress-tested elements, see how they finish out the stretch of the season, and make bigger decisions during the offseason. But I'm fascinated to find out who exactly Bobby Webster is as his own man. Subscribe to this podcast, leave 5 stars. Reach out anytime on Twitter and Instagram at JD Bunkis. I'm going to take a quick break. So it's going to be a painful day because you're going to see clips of Bichette wearing a different team's hat. It's not going to sit well. I mentioned it yesterday. You can understand the Blue Jays process in this moment. They thought they had a chance at getting Kyle Tucker. They went out and were aggressive with areas that they deemed to be more of a need, the pitching. They said, hey, we don't have pitching that we trust beyond this year. Yes, we nailed our rookie up until this point. Trey Savage looks like a guy that this team is going to be leaning on for the next, hopefully, decade. But beyond him, it's paper thin. Gossman and Bieber coming off the books. You don't know what you have in Jose Barrios. You lost Max Scherzer, you lost Chris Bassett, or you're assuming that you're going to lose those guys, I should say, because they still have yet to sign somewhere else. It's not a straightforward picture. So they decided to say, you know what, we're allocating as much money as possible to the starting pitcher that we believe has the highest ceiling, a guy who has shown he could be in Cy Young conversations, and put him with this pitching staff. We feel pretty good about that. They went international with Cody Ponce. They looked at his stuff. They believe that he is an incredible buy low candidate who is going to be a starter here for the next couple of seasons. Now you feel a measure of confidence beyond this year. Not this year is critically important. So this season, you're looking at it and saying, man, the big conversation is, do they have too many starting pitchers? That's such a great departure from where they've been before, where, yeah, it was Bowden, Francis. And then, God, thank God Eric Lauer worked out. Because don't forget that this team was reaching for a lot last year when they started to suffer starting pitching injuries. So they go out and they do that. That's great. They needed relief help. They bring in Rogers. They think that he's the guy. There's a lot of reason to believe that he is exactly what they hope that he can be, which is a late inning arm who really just confounds hitters. And that what they bought him at is, not only is he going to be important this season, but we think that his arm is going to age well, given that he doesn't throw hard. We believe, I would guess, that there's less volatility year over year in terms of what you're going to get from this guy. You've secured the now, but you've also secured an area of need moving forward in the future. They grab Okamoto, and then things start to shift. That's where you say, well, clearly they weren't in with Bo Bichette at the very beginning. I talked to Jim Bowden yesterday. He made it seem pretty clear that, hey, they were never really in on Bo Bichette, that they had a price, that they would have had conversations. But when Ross Atkins mentioned he's a free agent and he's earned that right, that whatever it is that the Blue Jays were comfortable paying him was probably a pretty far departure from what he ended up getting with the New York Mets, and why it didn't feel like the Blue Jays were even really involved in the 11th hour when it came down to the Phillies and the Mets. But the process of going after Kyle Tucker, who they viewed as a better long-term fit for this team, who also helped in the now, an incredible amount, but also they thought they could bank on in the future with looming questions in the outfield, also made a lot of sense. That they didn't make moves that were simply about, hey, what is going to be the win now in 2026? Each of them was met with, we're doing this not just for a season. We're doing this for the long-term health of our franchise, and it's why the process behind Kyle Tucker was fine. Then you find out that they offered Kyle Tucker 10 years at $350, with, again, Bowden saying there was probably some wiggle room on that $350 if Kyle Tucker would have needed it. So Bo Bichette signs immediately, and it's a gut punch because you still wanted that middle of the order bat, and every Blue Jays fan was acting greedy. You would also, for anybody that's critical of anyone that had that thought process, it wasn't just Kyle Tucker's name that was floated with the Blue Jays from the outset of the offseason. There were people like Jeff Passan was talking about how the Blue Jays are likely to end up with one of these two players, or feel likely, or however I'm paraphrasing this here. Most MLB insiders agreed the Blue Jays would come down with one of these two guys. And so the idea that there was going to be no Bo Bichette potential whatsoever, that wasn't really there until, the Philly stuff. Until that happened, and it was making it fairly clear that they were ready to move on, that it wasn't just posturing. So all of this has been like hypothetical, and all of this has been just talk. But today, Bo Bichette, when he gets introduced at 1 o'clock as a New York Met and has to put that hat on, I think it's going to sting a little different. It's going to hurt for Blue Jays fans. You can have two things can be true. You can have a really good offseason. People can be very excited about the future, but he's a fan favorite. You go down to the ballpark, what do you see the most? Vladdy and Bo jerseys. When you think about even the loss in the World Series, I think it's a little bit more painful now knowing that was it for Vladdy and Bo. An era of Blue Jays baseball that brought a different level of optimism to this fan base. Felt like those two guys together were going to be able to take this team out of the wilderness, that these two guys wanted to play their entire careers together. And depending on the two successes, that of the Blue Jays and that of Bo Bichette, to me, this now has all-time what-if potential. If Bo Bichette goes on to win a World Series with the New York Mets, if he's himself, guy who deals with the odd injury but doesn't give you A++ defense, but he's an A++ bat for the next 5 years, and the Blue Jays come up short, people are always going to wonder. They're going to second guess that decision. Again, I think it'll be important to keep this context of the way the Blue Jays handled it, which to me is totally defensible. But watching him be introduced with a new team, seeing him talk about the decision to go there, the excitement that he has to be reunited with Marcus Semien, having to sit on a dais with, the Mets. It's going to be an uncomfortable day. I'm not going to – it's going to be one where, because of my job, I'm going to be forced to listen and – oh, wait, is it at 1 or is it at 10? No, 10 is the Bills media conference. I got that mixed up. So there's 2 today. There's 2 that I'm going to have to pay attention to and that I'm going to listen and go through. But I can already tell you that the Bo Bichette one in particular is going to be deeply, deeply uncomfortable. Armin, before we take this break, quickly here, you threw in a name while I was talking to S that I really am interested in for the Raptors. I don't know how they make that work, and I actually don't know what the price point's going to be on him. But throw out the name that you like for the Raptors and why you threw out that name.
Jay Huff.
Yeah.
I believe he's leading the league in blocks. And he stretches the floor.
Yep.
He's on a cheap contract.
He throws a reverse dunk every time he dunks.
He has to reverse dunk.
Yeah.
And just seems like the perfect kind of fit for what the Raptors want for really cheap. The only thing
I don't know if he's really cheap.
The thing is, the Pacers think they found a hidden gem, and so they're not going to give up their low-cost gem unless we, trade some picks. And plus, I was thinking the Pacers, they're obviously doing the 1-year tank thing.
Yeah.
So maybe they'd be willing to give him up, but they're doing the Spurs did with Tim Duncan when they got that. They're just tanking for literally this season. They're going to be a top contender in the East next year. So.
Yeah, here's the problem. I love this name. I think that's very fun. And I hadn't even considered it because he's not really out there. But yeah, that there's 2 problems. One is that Jay Huff only makes $2.3 million this season, next, and then has a club option the year after that. So the idea that you're going to get that guy on what is a bargain basement contract for anything short of real assets is not going to happen. And if you're the Raptors, are you going to use real assets at this point of where the organization is to get a guy who still is very much a question mark in terms of what he can be on a very good team and as a regular minutes guy on a competitive team? And then the last piece of it is what you just mentioned, that the Pacers, God, I am a little nervous about them in terms of my confidence level of they're just going to rebound and be a title contender with Halliburton again. But if they do nail this draft pick in terms of what their future is going to be over the next 2-3 seasons is absolutely, one of, if not the best team in the Eastern Conference. They've got all their assets at their disposal. They've got contracts that they can trade and move. They've got a lot of depth at their guard position. They're in a very, 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 very good place. I don't think that anything short of a Godfather offer, the type of deal that you just cannot say no to, would make them move off of a cheap, controllable piece like this when they don't have a long rebuild ahead of them, that this is just going to be a 1-year stopgap, plug your nose, and then come back and next season make a run for it. Anyways, quick break, come back and talk to Luke Fox. All right, so quick programming note. We're moving Ryan Whitney to next week, Tuesday. And now the man, guys, nothing like somebody who just will be yeah, no problem. No problem on the fly. I will jump in here. I will do the duty. Luke Fox, NHL on Sportsnet. What's up, buddy? Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no worries. I figured someone must have canceled if you wanted me on. So.
Yeah. How could you say that? That's so rude. No, but hey, thank you for doing this because there is no more panicky situation when you do a live show than a guy in the 11th hour being like, hey, is another day better? And was like, yeah, we got to make a pivot here. We got to do something. And so I actually think that it's like a real statement to you personally in terms of, hey, who are the guys who's the guy that we can call that JD can just have a conversation with off the fly, essentially, who he trusts, who he's going to be able to do this with and has chemistry. So thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it. Okay, I want to start with this. Leafs and Red Wings, Leafs, Sabres next week. I can't remember the last time that all three of these teams were relevant all at once, where the games in the regular season actually mattered. So I'm a little excited for this, I got to say, but it brings me to this question. Which of these Atlantic teams, because there is such a bunch here, right? I think that we can safely say Tampa has separated themselves and just has the pedigree that we trust and respect. But everybody beyond that, including the Red Wings, who are only 2 points back for first in the Atlantic, I don't know if you can just put them down in pen and say, oh, yeah, I trust that they will be in a playoff position at the end of the year. So Red Wings, Canadiens, Bruins, Sabres, Leafs. Out of those teams, who do you trust the most?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Maybe the Canadiens. And I kind of can't believe I'm saying that. But I think maybe I am saying it because they have game breakers. We saw what Cole Caulfield did last night. And I like their defense. Certainly they've had questions in goal, and they've leaned a lot on overtime points, close games. They've been on the right side of a lot of those. But I'm not overly confident in any team in the Atlantic except for Tampa Bay right now. But I love that your point off the top. Isn't it great that Buffalo's relevant?
Yes.
Isn't it great that Detroit finally, for the first time since they got that beautiful Little Caesars Arena, they're relevant? Like everything from the Fedorov retirement to Patrick Kane setting records. And it's just like finally these teams that, the plan is to rebuild for what, 3, 4, 5 years, but it ends up being 8, ends up being a decade. And I think it's fantastic that these real hockey markets like Buffalo, Detroit, we knew Montreal would come around again, but that they're all meaningful again.
Yeah, man. So listen, this is not shade being thrown at Florida and Tampa. What they've done is commendable, and I know that we undercut it with the state tax conversations all the time, or the idea that dudes want to wear flip-flops to the arena and be in a market where there's not a lot of attention over, being in places that are true blue hockey markets. But I think we've kind of seen that despite the successes of the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning, the regional rivalry that they have with the Leafs just doesn't exist because those fan bases don't exist the same way, and the proximity is not what it needs to be for this to work. Having the Leafs and the Red Wings means something, and having the Leafs and the Sabres means something, and obviously the Leafs and the Habs, which to me always means something even when the Habs have been down. Like, that is critically important in terms of driving interest and, making for more compelling stories in this area. Like, not having the Buffalo Sabres just be a party full of, listen, I endorse this activity, but drunk Leaf fans getting on buses and piling into their arena and making fun of what has become a sad sack organization, that's great for the game. That Buffalo Bills fans get to be there, Buffalo Sabres fans get to be there being excited. And I grew up hating the Red Wings because they were sort of the Canada's extra team, right? Guys our age were bandwagoners for the Detroit Red Wings with their successes.
Yeah.
And so it always felt annoying to me that some of these guys were like celebrating Stanley Cups and buying memorabilia for me as a kid in the Yukon, or a kid in Ontario. Going, like, you're a Red Wings fan and you're not from Windsor? I don't know. This doesn't really pass the smell test for me. But I actually do think that if you're going to try to sell parity amongst the league, which is clearly what they're trying to do, then one of the bets here is that it increases rivalries amongst regional fan bases. And this actually might be the start of something new and refreshing.
Yeah, and I think it's also indicative of turnover in the Atlantic Division in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I think we almost got a little bit of fatigue with, okay, we can always just pencil in Toronto, Boston, Tampa, Florida as the teams at the top, and the rest are just, we're waiting. Maybe but we got to see it first, right? It was always like, it's cute that you're rebuilding Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, Montreal, but we know you're still 2 years away from being 2 years away. And now finally it's starting to turn. And all of a sudden it's made the regular season interesting for all the markets in the Atlantic. And I think it's fantastic. And I think it's a little bit overdue because it was getting a little bit stale. It was getting a little bit, we're talking in late January. We'd just be like, killing time, talking about the trade deadline. But basically, we'd be waiting for game 83. Whereas now, all these games are relevant. You're scoreboard watching a little bit more if you're a fan of any of the Atlantic teams. You're worried about who got the extra loser point because it affects your favorite team. And so I think it's refreshing. Now, the flip side of that is that, there's a little bit of panic.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of risk. And, Florida, Toronto, these teams might not make it.
Okay, so the Florida thing. I didn't add them to the group of Atlantic teams you trust because everybody trusts the formula, right? Everybody kind of – this has been one of the most underrated stories of the NHL season to me, which is they've been out of the playoff picture. And, yeah, of course, Toronto is Toronto in terms of they're going to absorb so much conversation when it comes to a team in panic mode and whether or not a team is going to make a playoffs. And the stakes are higher for them being a team that hasn't won a Stanley Cup. But, yeah, I think we're officially in range now with the Florida Panthers where you cannot be looking at this and saying it's a certainty that they get into the playoffs, right?
Absolutely. No, it's definitely in doubt. And it just underscores how awesome Alexander Barkov is to me. You subtract him and you're a little bit lost. Everyone gets slotted higher, and they're not quite up to the task. They get Matthew Tkachuk back this week. They're hoping he provides an emotional boost. I love Sergei Bobrovsky going full length of the ice and fighting Nedeljkovic. But you look at his numbers, he's not having a Hall of Fame year. And they've been really battered by injuries. You never want to count them out because this is the same core group that has done this in the past. They've been out of the picture in January and rallied to make it. And they're one of those teams that all they need is to get in. They don't care if they're at the 8th seed. They'll feel comfortable doing that. But we're running out of runway if you're the Florida Panthers. And urgency is definitely there. But the competition around them has never been so good. So I think they're at a very real risk of missing. I can't see a world where Toronto and Florida get in, put it that way.
I love that. I love that take because I still do see that world because, here's the thing. I'm really not convinced about the Bruins. And I know they just got red hot. They've ripped off, 8-1-1 in their last 10. This feels like I'm jinxing it, but I don't see them securing a playoff spot. I don't think that they'll stay above the rest of this group. And I still do have, I guess listen, I'm not watching Sabres games every single night. I don't follow them the way that I do the Leafs. So part of this is just my own what you've been for the last decade. But it's hard for me to just buy into this and say you're not going to have a collapse or you're just going to maintain the positive momentum that you've had as an organization over the first, 60% of the season that you've had.
I'm so fascinated to see what Jarmo Kekalainen does. Because when was the last time the Sabres were in a position to be a buyer? Like, to even think about buying. They've always been selling. And they have picks, they have prospects, they have cap space. So I wonder if he's aggressive. Now they have a really tough decision to make on Alex Tuch.
Yeah.
Because my understanding is he's asking for something like $10 million, which it sounds outrageous, but it's actually not outrageous because outside of a very aging Artemi Panarin, he's the best forward that's headed to market this summer. So someone's going to give him that. And you'd hate to, in the name of asset management, you'd hate to just keep him as an own rental. He's a local guy, so they have a tough decision to make on him. And how deflating would it be to a room that has rallied over the last month and a half or so if you traded away a guy like that?
Yeah.
So they're probably keeping him. But are they? If you're gonna keep him, why stop there? Why not add? Why not reward this group for their recent push? And like we're talking about, the Atlantic is kind of wide open, and there's a little bit of nothing to lose, and they have assets and cap space. They're a really fascinating team to me at the trade deadline, and really tough decisions, I think, for all the GMs in that division, because outside of Tampa, who is a sure bet to make the playoffs?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Now, the way that you frame it, I actually think there's more pressure on them than any team in the Eastern Conference to make moves at the deadline, positive ones. You haven't made the playoffs since what, 2011? I think that's the last time. I think that's the last time they were in. It was 2011 or 2010 range that the Sabres were last in. And when's the last time they won a playoff round? Like,
and you want to do it for the city, right?
Yeah.
Especially coming off the Bills.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, you want to reward the fan base a little bit, too.
That's it. So if you've got a drought that's extending this long, you've got a team that actually is creating positive momentum in your city. You've got a organization and a locker room that for the last 5 years we've talked about more. Hey, this is a disaster here. No one wants to go play in Buffalo. Everybody wants out. Everybody sees the successes of the players that have left and what they've been able to accomplish. I think that there is actually some added urgency. Not that you do something unbelievably stupid or completely short-sighted, but yeah, the idea that they would remove from this team is nuts to me, that they would not do that. But yeah, that you would have more pressure to say, we've got an asset pile. We've been doing the backwards trades year over year over year. Let's use some of this. Let's try to build moving forward. Let's try to make it to the playoffs, and especially given, how flat it is this year. And if you don't end up with a Florida Panthers team in the playoffs, like if they're one of the teams that misses, the added level of confidence that you would have as any one of these teams thinking, well, we've removed potentially the biggest impediment to our Stanley Cup chances in our conference. Yeah, we got to go for it. Okay, so the Leafs part of this. I got a little nervous watching that Minnesota game, and I'm curious to feel your read on this as well because, okay, it's first game back from a road trip, right? That's a schedule loss, and they had a schedule loss. And realistically, that's all that happened with that West Coast road trip too. Like overall success, you would have loved to have not blown multiple 2-goal leads against Mitch Marner. I think that's a pretty clear and obvious one. But overall, you got that win against Colorado. You close it out with the comeback victory against Winnipeg, which would have been a disaster if they lose that one. Get 5 points. You're okay. You come back. You've got a little bit of wiggle room in terms of the way people are going to be talking about your hockey team. You lose a schedule loss, much like you did against the Utah Mammoth. Where I am a little nervous is they looked really worn down in that game. Like Minnesota's missing their entire second line, and it just felt like they could forecheck the Leafs to death. Their blue line looked tired. They looked vulnerable. You saw Matthew Nyes kind of limping around. And now this Nylander stuff, in terms of him pulling the groin on the trip and not being with this team for an unclear period of time, I'm more nervous about that than I was with some of the other injuries earlier in the season where they were able to coalesce as a group by allowing other guys more opportunities. I do wonder if this stretch ahead of the Olympic break, which is going to be a grind, whether or not they can just survive this. I'm not looking for them to stay red hot and be collecting points every single night. I think that this is now becoming more of, just based on that one game, maybe I'm completely off on this, but that this stretch becomes more about, hey, collect as many points as you can, survive, and don't feel like you knocked yourself out of it.
Yeah, for sure. Like in a vacuum, I wouldn't mind that loss to Minnesota. They had a really hectic road trip, their longest one and their furthest one all season. And it's tough coming back. And, you're going against a team that has, probably 3 better puck-moving defensemen than you have one. Mm-hmm. And you just kind of say, okay, well, we didn't have it. We didn't have the legs that night. But the problem is, because they're October and they're November and chunks of their December were so crummy and they didn't get enough points when they didn't have to travel hardly at all, they've put themselves in a position where they're running out of games where you can just shrug and say, oh, let's flush it. Because you need points, because everyone around you is getting points. So it ramps up the pressure on tonight. It ramps up the pressure on Friday when Mitch comes, on Sunday afternoon when Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar come to your town, and then the Sabres. And then you're back on another really long road trip through Seattle and Western Canada. And it's every other night. And Matthew Nyes is coming out and saying, I don't feel right, and I'm not going to feel right probably until the Olympic break when I can rest. William Nylander's not even touching the ice, and when he does, you're worried about a groin injury that has already been aggravated once during a goal celebration. What's going to tweak it again? There's serious concerns. You're playing Troy Stetcher more than he's played in a decade. Jake McCabe, wear and tear. Chris Tanev got worn and torn right out of your lineup. There are serious concerns. They're running a little bit on fumes. Now, the flip side of that is their captain looks like he's back to normal. And he's playing awesome. You're getting pretty good stretches here from McMahon and Robertson. Domi's playing the best hockey of his season. So there are encouraging signs too, but you just got to keep it up, and you can't have too many, we didn't have it tonight, because the rest of the league is in the same boat, guys, and you got to keep pace. I'm wondering how many points out of the playoff picture would you be fine with them being come Olympic break?
3.
Like if they're 4.3? Yeah. Yeah, they got it.
The question is comfortable, right?
Like
I would say if you're 3 points out, you're going, all right, you can make that up. And I know it's flat.
Yeah.
I know it's tough to leapfrog teams, but I'm certainly not hitting any kind of a panic button 3 games back, especially considering those things. And I will say this too, in terms of like this is a little doom and gloomy, but I think rightfully so in terms of the pressure that is on these next 2 weeks. What I would say is, given how beat up they've been as a team, and the way that this thing's ending with 2 road trips and a unbelievably difficult home schedule, my guess is they come out of the Olympic break, hopefully one of the more refreshed teams in hockey, that you're getting Stolarz back healthy, that your blue line that has been worked into, dust is going to be able to be refreshed, that you've got, look at what John Tavares did after the Four Nations break a year ago. You're hoping that Matthews is coming off of a good run, but not a great run where he beats Canada, but that he maintains this level of momentum, that Nyes gets the time that he needs. And then I think the most curious one is, do you think we're now in range where William Nylander is not going to be playing in the Olympics?
Oh, he's playing.
Yeah,
I
know.
Playing.
Just
okay.
And they're missing other pivotal guys now too, right? Like they just had 2 guys removed from Sweden's roster that are no-goes.
Yeah. And Oliver Ekman-Larsson too, right? Like he's going to have extra games because he's on that team. But I was lucky enough to go over to Stockholm when the Leafs went a couple of years back, and to see how that nation treats William Nylander, he's playing. It would be like Austin not representing the U.S. or Crosby not representing Canada. I'm not saying Willie's as good as Crosby, but I'm just saying
no, we get it.
He's their face. He's their face. So, it's not a broken leg. It's a muscle. It's a groin. So he's playing.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, and I agree with it. I had Sam Halam on this show 2 weeks ago, and he was reiterating the exact same points you are, which is that he's the face of their program, that, he is the guy over there, that he's their best, most skilled player. I will say this. It's, a little frustrating that a year ago there were questions about Matthews' health heading into the Four Nations and him coming out of it and not really ever finding his game. Not to the level that it's at right now, right? Like, clearly. That is very obvious. And I made the point of, all right, you did this, but it's going to open you up to a different level of criticism upon your return if you can't find your game and you didn't use this stretch to rest. And I don't know why the same wouldn't be said for William Nylander, even understanding what international hockey means to these players and to the sport.
Yeah, sure. There might be some criticism, but, they've waited their whole careers for this.
Yeah.
And this is a guarantee shot to make a final, that you have a legitimate shot to make a Final Four. The Leafs are a question mark to make the playoffs. Like, you have a shot at an Olympic medal, and you've never even played in the Olympics, and your whole union fought for this. Like, this is meaningful. Mm-hmm. This is meaningful.
I'm not saying it's not. I'm not even really disagreeing with the idea that he shouldn't go. Like, he's William Nylander. It's Sweden. And I can't be a hypocrite here, right? Like, if this was like Sidney Crosby, the same circumstance, and I was looking at it, I would be going, he's got to go, right? If this is Nathan McKinnon, he's got to go. So I would be feeling the same way if I was a Swedish fan. It is a little difficult when you're the Leafs and it's 2 years in a row. And this one where you're scratching and clawing for a playoff spot and a guy's dealing with a wonky groin. And if he's playing at less than 100% and he re-aggravates that injury playing for Sweden or makes it worse or takes him out of the lineup when he returns for Leafs or he just can't find his game again, all I'm saying is people are going to take note of that here. Like, it's going to, I would guess, not fundamentally change who he is in the market moving forward, but that it is going to have an impact on a large portion of the fan base. If he goes over there, doesn't have success, gets hurt, comes back, and the Leafs miss the playoffs, a lot of people are going to be pointing to that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And you could say that about any Olympian that goes over and gets hurt. Like, remember?
No, but it's different when you're already hurt going in, though.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe. But this is the risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was never going to be a scenario where a bunch of Olympians go there 100% healthy, a bunch of Olympians come back 100% healthy, and this is why the owners aren't a big, huge fan of it. But I think to me, it's small-minded thinking. I think we need to think bigger, and the sport needs best on best to grow it.
Agree.
We love it because we live in Toronto, we live in Canada, but down in the States, they're still talking about all those shootout attempts TJ Oshie made, for Team USA. Like, those are moments.
Yeah.
Like, I really think the best players need to go, and if they're hurt and not injured, they should play. And right now, William Nylander's hurt. He's not, especially in whatever it is, 2-3 weeks time. He'll be good enough to put on the Trey Cronar.
Well, yeah, you can't compare these things to what the stakes are of this Olympics. But I had Ernie Clement on yesterday, and he made the World Baseball Classic roster for Team USA. And I'm asking him about the meaning. His point of reference was not, hey, this means so much to me because I'm thinking about the American players who have played in this tournament, in my sport. He referenced Miracle, right? So, yeah. He wasn't alive. So, yeah, I think that it's pretty cool that they get to do this. I think it's critically important. I've been railing against the NHL for years and years. I don't even think I'm making the point that I think he shouldn't go. The only way that I would think that is if he doesn't feel like there has to be a percentage of how compromised he is where he has to actually look at it and go, all right, if this has real potential to take me out for the season, and I'm not even going to be contributing to this team beyond 80%, that's when it starts to tilt. Okay, so Nyes. This is a tricky one for me, too, because they did have a moment in the season where he was dealing with something, and they rested him, and he came back, and he played well. He played some of his best hockey. And yet we've just outlined this scenario where they're in a real grind ahead of the Olympic break. They're in a real grind to make the postseason. They can't just punt on points. He is an important player. You'd rather have him on the ice than off of it. But, yeah, this thing continues to linger, and it's hard not to make the case that you give him a day or two here. What's your read on Nyes?
I think this comes back to where they are in the standing.
Yeah.
Like, if this had have happened last year, remember how they would be, like, giving guys extra rest?
Yes,
like,
of course.
They never rushed a single guy back. They've done this to themselves by not playing well in the early going. And they feel like I hate to use the phrase must win, but every game seems very important, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if this guy gives you the thumbs up, even after he skips morning skate and decides not to take line rushes during warm-up, if he gives you a thumbs up, you're putting him in. Craig Berube said the other day, he's like, usually we like guys to practice a couple times before they make a return. But if Willie comes to me one morning and says I'm good to go, he's going in. And that just speaks to, how badly they need the points. Now, in saying that, we've seen proof of concept in him getting some rest and playing well. Coming out of the Christmas break, he had a stretch of 3 or 4 games where he was fantastic.
Yep.
But even at whatever percentage he is, he makes a beautiful assist on the power play the other night against Minnesota. And you're just like, okay, who is Jacob Quillen going to make that play? Like, which Marley's going to make that play? You don't know. It's a really tough decision, but I think they should think long and hard. And is there a game or two where we can give him a break, give him a rest? Because the guy has come out in front of the cameras and said it really only gets better with rest.
Yeah, you don't like that. You don't like that at all. Like, you'd really like this to be him saying that a day or two before the Olympic break, not 2 weeks before the Olympic break. So Anthony Stolar's timeline. I put the over/under at 1.5 starts before the Olympic break. Are you taking the over? Or are you taking the under?
Oh. That's a good line. I'll take the over. I'll say 2.
Yeah.
I'll say 2.
That's what I bet,
won't
too.
say 3, but I'll say 2.
Yeah. I said it's like a minus 167, the over on 1.5.
So there's 4 games on the West Coast trip. Why don't you give them 2 of those?
Mm-hmm.
One of them's a back-to-back. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like and to your point about them being overly cautious, I would guess that is still what they are doing with this guy, considering their goaltending depth versus what we're talking about with Nyes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because now maybe he would have already played if Hildeby was, throwing out an 820 out there.
Right.
But Hildeby's been fantastic. So he's afforded Stolarz more time to rest up. Like, you talk to Anthony and he'll tell you that, he feels okay now. It's just getting more NHL shots, getting used to the rhythm of the game. He's been gone a long time.
Yep.
Over 2 months. So, he's getting used to NHL shooters. That's my understanding is the whole conditioning loan is because the Leafs are so banged up and tired, they can't have proper long practices. So that's why he's with the Marlies is to get, pro shooters on a daily basis. That like he needs to just see the puck, get back to his positioning and his rhythm and going crease to crease, all those things. But health-wise, he says he's good to go. It's just game speed.
Luke, thanks for jumping on today, buddy. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. Have a good one, JD.
Yeah,
Enjoy
man.
the game. Should be a good one tonight.
I'm excited for it. I really am. That's no lie. Luke Fox, NHL on Sportsnet. Yeah, I'm pumped up for this game. And I'm really excited for the Sabres game. Listen, the Marner one is going to be the focus of the week. It just is. Like, he's coming home, and there's going to be tons of conversations about how the crowd reacts and the video tribute and more questions for his teammates who, Matthews looked exhausted by it already. So good luck to Luke and the other reporters that have to ask more questions about Mitch Marner to a Leafs team that got those questions a week ago. It's a big game. There's no doubt about it. But from a standing standpoint and an intrigue standpoint, for me personally, yeah, the Marner game is one. I really want to see them win that game, get the revenge, not blow it. It's a great test. It's a pressure-packed game where your crowd, I believe, will be very hot. But I'm not as excited, but I'm shockingly close to excited for Red Wings and Sabres. And it's been a minute since I could say that. It is Leafs game day, so you can score a Popeyes chicken sandwich for only $6 in classic or spicy. Make it your new game day tradition. Get your $6 chicken sandwich at a Popeyes near you. Let's take a quick break and hit what we missed. So we have stuff from the Bills media conference starting to trickle in. Looks like Brandon, our Bills fan. You don't have to listen to the show, Rendo. I know you're working, but this counts as work. You should be listening to what your Bills have to say. This is one quote that we got from it already that he felt he wanted to put in here. Terry Bakula, on his decision to bring in a new coach, was, quote, based on the results of our game in Denver, end quote, I did not fire a coach based on bad officiating decisions. I felt like we had hit the proverbial playoff wall. 13 seconds, missed field goal, the catch. Is the catch in reference to Brandon Cooks, Rando?
That's my understanding.
That's what they're calling the catch in Buffalo? That's the catch to you?
To him.
Yeah. To him? Yeah, all right. That's tough, man. Like it's very strange, the McDermott stuff, from the standpoint of, okay, a lot of NFL people are doing this take today and yesterday and the day before. And I've seen a lot of this. And the same thing happened with Harbaugh, where they're like, we are shocked. They had all these winning seasons. How could you move off a guy that offers this stability? And listen, I'm with the Bills fans who wanted this guy gone. Yes, did he help instill a culture in Buffalo that should be commended? Absolutely. But this to me is Dwayne Casey, if you want it for as a Raptors fan. Some guys come in, they can set a culture, they can have winning records year over year over year. But if they keep having the same failures in the playoffs and you've got a special talented group in a window, at some point you want to be able to take a look at what is outside. And the Raptors went out and got Nick Nurse. And yes, Kawhi Leonard was probably a little bit more important in that equation. But Nick Nurse was the right coach at the right time for that team. No one would disagree with that take. Mm-hmm. Like if you swap in Dwayne Casey for Nick Nurse, do you think the Raptors win the championship? I would say that it's definitely way more of a question mark than had they just stuck with Dwayne Casey. And Sean McDermott, all due respect, you're now the Dwayne Casey of the Buffalo Bills. You helped set up Pound the Rock to get better, but eventually you have enough kicks at the can here with an elite offensive player, one of the best, if not currently the best in the game. And you fail this many times in a row in heartbreaking fashion, and it's just tough to be putting this together and saying, well, it's a bad break and it's a bad bounce, and they have the stability. It's like, yeah, that's actually the one thing you do have. And that should be the legacy of Sean McDermott. If the Bills get over the hump next year, right? If they win a Super Bowl, Sean McDermott will get his credit for helping build the foundation that the Buffalo Bills had to acquire that level of success. Some people will look at it and just make the legacy, hey, they flipped out of him and that was the right call and that maybe we would have won more with that. That's not the take. They were the Buffalo Bills, and the fan base should remember this. Who you are is perennial loser fan base that was an absolute afterthought. For my life, I didn't, watch football during the 4 falls of Buffalo. I was just a tiny little baby. It has been, your big moment was beating the Patriots on a Monday Night Football game. Like, what else you got? I don't have a lot of Buffalo Bills memories. And you couldn't get the quarterbacks right. And there's a lot of JP Lossmans in there. But yeah, this is, you got to capitalize on this window, and you got to give Sean McDermott his credit, his flowers for helping build this group. But I'm extremely excited to see what they do next. And also, listen, I'm not trying to kick sand on this guy's grave, but to me, the most damning stuff is the defense. This is a defensive head coach. When you have the defensive head coach, you have to feel like when you've got the quarterback that this is a massive advantage for you, right? Like, look at what Seattle is doing right now with Mike McDonald. They've got Sam Darnold at quarterback. Is Sam playing well? Sure. But going into this weekend, if he lays a complete egg, no one's going to be blown away by that. No, Sam Darnold played poorly in a high leverage game against the pass rush in an NFC championship game. Like, he just won his first playoff game. You're supposed to have an advantage on that side of the ball. And during this tenure, during his time as the head coach, there's not a playoff series or a playoff. There's not any proof of concept that this guy was giving them a major advantage on the defensive side of the ball. I think Warren Sharp put this out. I might be misquoting the stat by a hair here, but the difference between the Chiefs, who had Patrick Mahomes and their defense, and during their playoff runs of points per game against, I think was 8 different than the Buffalo Bills. That just can't happen. Your coach isn't Andy Reid. Your coach is not Kyle Shanahan. Your coach is a defense-first guy, and your defense killed you every single playoff run of Josh Allen's career and probably got looked at in a little bit of a smaller light because the quarterback always takes more blame, and Josh Allen's now lost 7 overtime games, and he just had his worst playoff game in a very, very long time. But yeah, no, sorry, this is on the coach. He is accountable for this. This is not simply washing it over for Allen and his failures when he has been largely spectacular, very, very good player, unbelievable player who I don't buy the Josh Allen has playoff ghost thing. I just don't. I don't think that he makes bad plays or is the main reason why they have lost these games. I think that this one he deserves blame for. In particular, there's 2 plays. I don't blame him as much for the Dawson Knox miss as some people do. It's a tough throw. He's got his feet flat. It's rushed. He feels the pressure behind him. There's a misholding call that whatever. That one's a miss. You could have had it for the win, sure. The big ones to me are the end of the half. There's just no reason for him. Like, sure, the coach called up the play, but the idea that I think it's the center or the guard that should have fallen on the football is nuts. For him to be running when there's that little time on the clock trying to force a play, that felt desperate to me. And then the second interception of the game, or the first, where he throws it and it's 2nd and 13. And he tries to feather one in and it gets picked off. You're like, yeah, that one just can't happen. It's a desperation play. Those 2 desperation plays I viewed as not good enough. Ultimately, yeah, is there a conversation about the GM and the roster? Sure. I think that they're much better than people give them credit for.
But to that point, Bunk, I just want to interject. Pagula also said that the coaching staff pushed to draft Keon Coleman, and he doesn't think it's fair to pin that on Bean.
Well, guess what? That was the book all along. That's been out there for forever. Keon Coleman, though, who did have a touchdown in that game. So, like, that's what you want from your first-round pick is get a touchdown in a big playoff game. Yeah, it's a miss. It's a busted pick. I will say, though, that, Brandon, who's the receiver that the Chiefs got? Xavier Worthy instead of him?
Yes.
Yeah. That was made up at the time of like, oh, my God, they gave the Chiefs the guy, and then they take Cole. At least that part of it didn't turn out to be true. Xavier Worthy's. Sure, would you rather have him than Keon Coleman right now? Yeah, it's hard to have stock lower than Keon Coleman, but Xavier Worthy hasn't exactly turned into Justin Jefferson, so who really cares about that one? Either way, my point simply is I don't understand the pushback by NFL media at large that this was a poor decision by the Bills, and if you recall, I was bringing this up. I brought it up to Dan Graziano. I brought it up, I think, with James Palmer. I said that these guys had the most pressure of any team heading into the postseason because of the stakes, because of the trauma, because of no Burrow, no Lamar, no Patrick Mahomes. It was a wide open field. You had to go to Denver and you had to beat Bo Nix. It was right there on the table for you. You just had to get the thing. I really do believe that they beat their toughest opponent in the first round of the playoffs this year in the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that everything else up until the Super Bowl for whoever comes out of the NFC was going to be easier than beating the Jags in their stadium to open up the playoffs. So moving off of McDermott to me is not even remotely controversial. It's the right move. It was the right time. And I'm totally with the owner when he says that they hit the proverbial playoff wall. I think that's absolutely true. All right, Armin. Wait, before we do that, it is Leafs game day. Score a Popeyes chicken sandwich for only $6 in classic or spicy. Make it your new game day tradition. Get your $6 chicken sandwich at a Popeyes near you. All right, what did we miss? And yeah, Brando, keep it coming. If there's anything else interesting from this media conference, you can just jump in.
Let's stick to football for a second because Baker Mayfield came with a haymaker on Twitter yesterday. A writer had put out an article about Stefanski's past failures and how it might be different with the Falcons. Baker quote tweeted it and said, "Failed is quite the reach, pal. Still waiting on a text/call from him being Stefanski, after I got shipped off like a piece of garbage. Can't wait to see you twice a year, coach."
Yeah.
So obviously add some juice for next year. Coach-player feuds are the best.
This one's...
I don't know what it is, but where do you feel Baker's approval rating is at, though, Bunk? Like, I feel like this year was the first year I kind of saw people saying, getting tired of the whole underdog kind of thing. They're like, okay, like,
No, I'm not tired of that
you're not
whatsoever.
there?
No. Here's what I would say. So this guy who wrote this tweet, Orlando Ledbetter, it's him editorializing, and he's clearly a Stefanski guy, which a lot of people are. Like, look, Stefanski's record in Cleveland was not sparkling, and he did get those Coach of the Years. But, yeah, Atlanta grabs him. He's one of the first two coaches off the board. Actually, has Harbaugh even signed? I don't think he has.
He has.
He has. So that's official? That's
Yes.
done? Okay. Because where I left it in terms of my brain was, yeah, it's going to get done, but they're still working on it. Okay, so he's done. He's in New York. But yeah, Stefanski was the other guy on the board that everybody wanted, and he gets a lot of accolades. And part of it is people look at him and go, well, he did a lot with a little at the quarterback position. He had 13 different starting quarterbacks in 5 years. 2020 to 2025, Stefanski had 13 quarterbacks that started for him. The best one was Baker Mayfield. That's the year they went 11-5. That's the year that they beat Baltimore. Baker has the right to be pissed looking at that quarterback situation, the way things were handled, shipping him out to replace him with Deshaun Watson, who is one of the, if not the worst trade in the history of the NFL. You brought in a guy who you never should have even been thinking about, and you handed him, I think it was $240 million in guaranteed money, and it cost you first-round picks during a cycle where your defense was good enough and your offensive line was good enough that you could have been a contender with competent quarterback play, period. It is a monumental, should be forever remembered, horrible, horrible, horrible decision by the organization. I don't know how much Stefanski was a part of it, but based on this tweet, my guess is that Stefanski was never enamored with Baker Mayfield and that they weren't very close. And listen, Baker is the type of guy who clearly rubs people the wrong way. Like, he gets into it with everybody. You think that doesn't happen with his teammates and his coaches as well? Of course it does. Of course it does. To your point about are people tired of it, I don't think so. There's a little bit of roll your eyes, though, when your team's not performing, and he sucked this year.
Mm-hmm.
I bet on them multiple times in extremely soft spots. That loss against the
It started good,
Dolphins,
too.
yeah, of course it did. They beat the
season
Seahawks.
started great.
He ripped up the Seahawks. Ripped them up. So he gets the benefit of the doubt this year with the injury, right? Like, that's just the way that it goes. He had an awesome year the year before. He started the season hot. He takes the shoulder injury. People aren't really sure what they're going to get. And then he starts having these awful turnovers, and their team flubbed it down the stretch. Like, what did they have to win the division? 9 games? Did they win 8 or did they win 9? I think they won 9 games. Either way, they had some cupcakes on the schedule, man, and that division stunk. They won 8 games. Okay, so they only finished with 8 wins. You had to win 9 games to get in the postseason, and one of those games, you had to beat the Miami Dolphins, who were playing Quinn Ewers and had just benched their quarterback and were ready to completely take a knee on the season, and you couldn't do it. And
I'm kind of happy we got to see Bryce Young, honestly. In the playoffs and stuff.
Bryce was fun, and it was refreshing, and they were a good team, and they were definitely way, way, way tougher out than Tampa would have been for the Rams. Like, I don't think that there's any reality where the Rams lose that game to the way the Buccaneers are playing. But, yeah, we're definitely on Baker watch now because there was already pressure on him in terms of what he's going to be next season, fully healthy and with his teammates back. And I'm hoping they bring back Mike Evans because he is one of those guys where I don't want to see him play in a different uniform, although that's someone who I'm guessing the Bills are probably thinking about. Mm-hmm. I like Alec Pierce for the Bills, by the way. That's the guy that I would be kind of hoping that you get. And then maybe a draft pick, but my draft picks would be going to the defense. But either way, whatever. That's a side tangent thing. You already have a lot of pressure on your organization because Baker Mayfield did the whole victory lap of everybody screwed this up. Rams, you can't really fault them for not keeping him over Stafford. But
Bunk, do you think he's a season or two away from not having kind of like this elongated career that a lot of quarterbacks have?
This is where I'm going with this. Is like he got to victory lap the Panthers, he got to victory lap the Browns. But if he has another poor season where they don't make the playoffs, then we're right back to the same way we perceive Baker coming out of Cleveland, which is, yeah, he's all right. Yeah, but I don't know if you're going to win with him. And that's when, to your point about people getting annoyed with the personality, if you're not winning games and he's not taking accountability and he's starting rivalries with guys that like don't actually view him the same way, then it becomes tiresome. But now with this tweet, I love it. I absolutely love that he's putting his flag in the ground, that he wants to go up against the Atlanta Falcons and make that suddenly interesting for people, because I think the NFC South for most fans is kind of an afterthought. Like one of the guys that produces Leafs Talk, Luke Swadron, he's a Falcons fan.
Yeah.
And when I asked him who he cheered for, he said, I cheer for an irrelevant franchise, one that people do not talk about. And I guessed with my second guess, the Atlanta Falcons.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. So
What was your first guess? Giants?
no, Saints.
Okay.
And the Saints are far more relevant. They have been. They had Drew Brees. They had Sean Payton. So, but
You used to give it to Simon.
no, but I did think NFC South. Like my brain went there, and there's more people that are Saints fans because they had those successes with Sean Payton and with Drew Brees that I thought maybe that was going to be the case. Like you're more likely to be a Falcons fan if you're my age because you watch Michael Vick and you fell in love with Michael Vick than you are if you're Luke's age. I don't know who the Falcons player was that got him into the Falcons. I got to ask him this question. But either way, or how this ended up occurring, that you become a Falcons fan. That's the beauty of Canada, is like everybody's got a different weird random team.
I almost hopped on because I'm kind of don't have a team. I almost hopped on the Falcons like last year. Just because I guess they have some like style. The city of Atlanta's, glitz and glamour a bit.
That's not enough.
Nowadays.
That's not enough. That's
Cool logo.
I don't think that. Yeah, I don't think that you could just, when you're older, pick an NFL team without having some kind of resonance where you're watching a game and you really love a player, or you loved a game and you found yourselves rooting for them, and then it happens organically like that. But either way, I love this. I've said this many times. I don't think there's enough hate in sports. Hate in sports is amazing. That's why I'm excited about Leafs, Sabres, Leafs, Red Wings, is that I want hate in sports. It's healthy to not view your competition as your buddies. I don't want to see Mitch Marner and the Leafs play grab ass. I want to see them hate each other. That's the thing that's going to be lost to history is William Nylander coming out and dominating the first period of that hockey game against the Golden Knights and feeling for a moment like, ooh, maybe this guy cares more about, putting it in Mitch Marner's face, and he's actually going to elevate the game like this, and he's not going to be all cutesy with Mitch Marner. So I like sports hate. I'm endorsing this. I think it's awesome. It definitely has some ability to backfire on you. Like Baker's going to get made fun of by Falcons fans if you lose, but you shouldn't just be afraid of failure. And I think too many young athletes and too many guys in professional sports right now, dunk contest
I was
stuff,
just going to present.
are too afraid of failure. And so I love Baker for this. Great. Good on him for doing it. All right. We'll see you tomorrow.